Hello, my name is Ryan Gottfredson, and I'm the author of The Elevated Leader. And I feel fortunate that this book has opened up the opportunity to work with thousands of leaders across many different organizations across the world. And across my experience working with leaders, there's a theme that's popped up, and I'm going to call it the 3 causes for leadership failure. In my mind, I repeatedly see that if a leader fails in some way or significantly missteps, is because of one of these 3 reasons. The first reason is that their individual complexity falls below the complexity of their environment. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some really difficult circumstances that leaders find themselves in. That does not mean that they are impossible to navigate. A leader's success in really complex environments is going to be predicated upon their level of personal complexity. Now, we could break up our personal complexity in a variety of ways. Our self-complexity, our behavioral complexity, our cognitive complexity, our emotional complexity, and our moral complexity. And the reality is that most of us and most leaders have an area of complexity that they probably struggle with. And when we struggle with individual complexity, it holds us back from being able to effectively navigate our complex environment. So if you look at examples like Blockbuster, of course we don't see Blockbuster anymore, I would argue that one of the reasons why is because the leaders of Blockbuster were not complex enough to deal with the complexity of their changing marketplace, which was digital movies. So that's the first cause. The second cause is generally rooted in some form of emotion or issues with emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence can be broken down into 4 different groupings: our self-awareness and our self-management, as well as our other awareness and our ability to navigate the emotions of others. Now, I imagine that most people excel in at least one of 4 of these areas, but we may not excel in all of these areas. And when I find leaders who are struggling, particularly with their people management, it generally is rooted in a lack of emotional intelligence in some way, right? So take, for example, micromanaging our employees. That is a signal that that individual is lacking in some form of emotional intelligence, usually self-awareness and or self-management. All right, the third cause of leadership failure is because ultimately they have a fear of failure. In other words, they have a fixed mindset. Across my experience working with thousands of leaders, what I generally find in organizations is that at least 60% of leaders have a fixed mindset. What this means is that their bodies are more wired to avoid failure and to look good, as opposed to continue to learn and grow. So how this plays out in organizations is leaders with a fixed mindset have a tendency to hold on to what's worked in the past, because in their mind, this is the proven formula for success. But they have a hard time recognizing that what has worked in the past is unlikely to get them where they want to go in the future. That at some point in time, leaders are going to have to let go of what's worked in the past and grab a hold of something that is less proven. And most leaders struggle to make that shift, that transition. That's one of the reasons why we see a lot of organizations struggle with agility, is because ultimately they have a fixed mindset. So those are the 3 causes, the 3 primary causes that I see for leadership failure. Their self-complexity falls below their environmental complexity. 2, they struggle with emotional intelligence. And 3rd, they have a fear of failure or have a fixed mindset. Now, what's interesting about these 3 causes is that they share the same root. All 3 of these things is evidence that they are lacking in their vertical development altitude. Now, we have 2 different sides of ourselves. We've got our doing side and we've got our being side. And when I say they're lacking in their vertical development altitude, I'm not suggesting that they lack certain knowledge or skills or abilities. They probably have that. But what they're lacking in is that being side, meaning that their bodies are a little bit more wired for self-protection as opposed to value creation. And so if you have leaders that are struggling with any of these 3 causes, or even if it's yourself and you want to elevate above these things, we've got to focus on your being side, help you awaken to where you're at, figure out where you need to go, and then help you get there. And if I could help you in that in any way, I would love to do so.